is, and also a description of what we've done to date. Then we'll have a more thorough explanation of what each of the modes are and why those are under consideration, and followed by a Q&A. And I wanted to note, if you have questions anytime during the presentation, would you please put those in the Q&A function, and we will be taking questions at the end of the meeting. The team, the City of Shoreline representatives, you just heard from Randy Witt, who's the Public Works Director, Natasha Walters, who is the Transportation Services Manager, is participating today. Nora Daly Pang, who is the Project Manager, will be presenting initially about the Transportation Master Plan. Kendra Dudinsky is the City Traffic Engineer. Tricia Yunke is the City Engineer, and Catherine Lander, the Project Administrator, who is also participating, capturing all the notes of today's meeting. The Farron Piers team is led by Kendra Breland, who you will also hear today presenting, and Sarah Saviscus, who's the Deputy PM, and she'll be handling the Q&A function later in the meeting. Myself, Marcy Wagner from Burt Consulting, and Rebecca Fornaby are both supporting the meeting today. So I would like to do a brief Zoom poll. We would just like to hear how you first, or how you have participated previously, if you have, and also how you learned about this event. So if you participated in the open house, survey, small group discussions, or other, please let us know what those were. And also, if in the other category, if you can put in the chat how you participated or heard about the event. That's very helpful information to us to know what is reaching people in the community. All right, it looks like we've had good participation in the survey, which is excellent. And also the social media seems to be reaching some, and email as well. So I see there are a couple of comments in the chat as well. So thank you for including those. With that, I'm going to turn the meeting to Nora to talk about the Transportation Master Plan.
Thanks, Marcy, and welcome everyone. I first want to just set the table for our discussion about what is the TMP. First and foremost, the TMP needs to be a realistic plan that results in action, as the TMP will guide transportation investments over the next 20 years based on community needs and priorities. So why update the TMP now? The last time the TMP was updated was 2011, so that's 10 years ago, and we must update the TMP by 2023 in order to align with the city's comprehensive plan, meet Growth Management Act requirements, maintain the city's eligibility for certain grant funding, and set transportation policies for guiding the development of our city. What will make the TMP successful is a great question to ask at the start of this process. And we believe to be successful, the TMP must have a clear and consistent vision, priorities that reflect the community and council goals, policies, programs, and projects that reflect existing work and future needs, and a feasible, financially sustainable roadmap for investments. So where are we in the process? The TMP update is a 2-year process with the goal of adoption by the end of 2022. There will be multiple opportunities throughout the process to give feedback, and we are currently in Outreach Series 2. Your input is very important to help shape the ultimate plan. Let's talk about the process of developing a TMP. Ultimately, the TMP update will include policies, programs, and projects. I like to refer to them as the 3 Ps that will guide the development of our city's transportation system. On the existing system to date, our team has inventoried the existing street network, where the trails are, sidewalks, bike facilities, and transit, and we'll be touching on that later in today's presentation. We also developed a vision and goals. We are currently defining the type of facilities that should exist for each one of those modes and where they should be. After summer, we'll be moving into a gap evaluation where we will identify where there are gaps between existing system and the vision and goals. And then finally, the TMP next spring, we will be developing a list of projects needed to fill those gaps and identifying TMP policies and programs. We'll be bringing the TMP to council at the end of 2022 for adoption. Now I want to walk through what we've done to date. During our Outreach Series 1, we received feedback from about 500 people who participated in the online survey, which ran for the month of February. We also hosted 2 identical online open houses, one during lunch and one in the evening. We gave briefings to stakeholder groups, including the Council of Neighborhoods, several neighborhood associations, the Chamber of Commerce, North King County Mobility Coalition, and the Park and Tree Board. During Outreach Series 1 meetings, key discussion topics kept coming up. I want to walk through those highlights. On safety, people expressed concerns about the safety of pedestrians. For transit, people wanted information about how to get to and from the future light rail stations, as well as around the city via transit. Shared use mobility is a relatively new concept in transportation planning that I'll be explaining in more depth in a minute. We heard an interest for car light and car free options to make short trips to key destinations with shared use mobility options like bike share, scooter share, and car share. On sidewalks, many requested a status update on the implementation of new sidewalks from the voter-approved sales and use tax. Neighborhood paths, participants expressed interest in formalizing and beautifying a network of neighborhood paths. On bicycle facilities, people wanted to know the type of bicycle facilities are being proposed for corridor projects. And finally, on street parking, people were concerned about the anticipated loss of on-street parking as the city develops and expressed the need for on-street parking to support businesses. Our survey 1 asked the public, what are their most important transportation priorities? Safety was clearly the top priority, followed by proximity, connectivity, travel time, and equity. A full summary of survey 1 results are available on our project webpage. And there's our project webpage right there, shorelinewa.gov/TMP. I want to put in a plug here. If you haven't already, please take the survey by July 16th. Tell your family, friends, and neighbors to take the survey. And sorry, let's move to the next slide. Oh, sorry, this is what I wanted to say. The following presentation is really going to help greatly in giving information that could guide participation in the survey. Okay. So drawing from what we learned from Outreach Series 1, as well as city staff input expressed during a TMP goal setting workshop, the project team developed a draft TMP Vision and Goals. A vision statement defines a plan's long-term goals and guides decision-making. Here's the vision for the type of transportation system we like to provide by 2040, the planning horizon for the TMP. I won't read it to you, but to paraphrase, the city seeks to safely accommodate all travel modes, foster a healthy environment, provide a great place to live for everyone. Achieving this goal will require ongoing community input. Having clearly defined measurable goals will help the city accomplish this vision. The TMP vision has 6 goals. Number 1, prioritize safety, meaning make the city's transportation system safe and comfortable for all users. Goal 2, seek equity, ensure all people, especially those whose needs have been neglected, are well served. Goal 3, provide multimodal options, strengthen the multimodal network, specifically walking, biking, and taking transit. Goal 4, build a connected community, complete multimodal transportation connections to and from key destinations. Goal 5, protect the environment, make transportation decisions that increase climate resiliency. And finally, goal 6, support a vibrant community, make transportation decisions that support livability. City staff presented the vision and goals to City Council on May 24th, and they endorsed them. Now I would like to introduce the concept of shared use mobility. Shared use mobility is a fairly new concept in transportation planning. It focuses on providing multiple forms of transportation that people can share either at the same time, like riding the bus, a carpool, or taking light rail, or one after the other, like using bike share or scooter share. Mobility hubs are places of connectivity where different modes of transportation come together seamlessly at concentrations of employment, housing, shopping, and recreation. It can include space for bike share, scooter share, car share, as well as curb space for ride-hailing services like Uber and Lyft. To maximize the use of the upcoming light rail and to support car light and car-free lifestyles, the city is interested in creating mobility hubs at strategic locations across Shoreline. The city engaged with UW's Evans School Consulting Lab to research how shared use mobility hubs can support travel throughout the city. The project team is now working on integrating their findings into the TMP update. We'll be sharing more about this in upcoming outreach efforts. Now I'd like to pass it back to Marcia for another poll question.
Thank you, Nora. We're curious to hear from you. Have you used any of these types of mobility options like ride sharing, car sharing, van pooling, the others listed here, bikes, scooters? And if there are others, if you could enter them in the chat. So interested in hearing from you if you have tried any of these options in the past or perhaps even use them regularly. And then secondly, we will be asking which of these shared use mobility options you'd be interested in using. Going to give everyone a moment here. have someone suggested that we have a none or haven't used them option. Maybe if you could note that in the chat would be great. So the second question, which of these shared use mobility options would you be interested in using? And if you could enter that in the chat, that would be helpful information for our team to know.
That's a wrap on the poll.
All right.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And hold on, bear with me. There we go. Again, this is Kendra Braylon, Fair and Peers. So working as the principal in charge from the consultant team. So I'm going to kind of walk you through some more of the more traditional travel modes. So I feel like Nora got the really exciting stuff with the new mode of shared mobility. But let's remember that a transportation master plan really needs to serve the bread and butter of how folks travel around Shoreline, both today and in the future. So I'm going to walk through each of these modes and how they can be accommodated by Shoreline's transportation system. And we're going to start with how the system can accommodate people driving. So there are many street features that influence your experience driving along a roadway. Traffic signals, stop signs, roundabouts, speed humps. These are just a few examples of features that influence how you experience the roadway as a driver. Different types of roadways are intended to serve different purposes. The city classifies its roadways into 6 broad categories, which you can see on this map. Interstate 5 is shown, although the city does not own, operate, maintain this roadway. However, there are 5 other categories: principal arterials, minor arterials, collector arterials, local primaries, and local secondaries that the city takes a more active role in planning. This slide shows these street classifications with specific Shoreline examples. So Aurora Avenue North is a principal arterial, meaning that it provides a high level of regional mobility, connecting cars in transit to other cities throughout our region. And it also includes sidewalks on both sides of the street. Meridian Avenue North is a minor arterial. It is a critical connection, but it's generally designed to carry fewer cars and offers lower speeds. The city strives to provide bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure on these roadways. Going down the street classification hierarchy, Greenwood Avenue North is an example of a collector arterial which connects neighborhoods. And streets like 25th Avenue Northeast and Wallingford Avenue North provide local access and generally do not have transit service, sidewalks, or bicycle facilities. So how do we measure the performance of our streets? One way that Shoreline evaluates its streets is by analyzing, how long drivers have to wait at intersections, e.g. a traffic light or a stop sign. This is a standard measured methodology called level of service. And intersections receive a level of service grade on a scale of A through F. Level of service A represents free flow conditions with little to no delay, and level of service F represents highly congested conditions with long delays. It's important to note that the grade school lettering of level of service can be misleading. Level of service A is not the goal. While little to no delay might be convenient for drivers, it also may indicate that we've built too wide of streets for the demand, and the space dedicated to streets could be better used for other purposes, such as sidewalks, bike lanes, on-street parking, greenery, or other urban amenities. As planners, we try to balance the needs of many street users. So this map here shows how our streets in Shoreline are performing today during the PM peak hour, which is kind of measured during a period of time between 4 and 6 p.m., kind of that afternoon weekday commute. As you can see, many intersections are operating with little to no delay. Those intersections are shown in green, but others have more noticeable delay. For example, intersections along corridors like Aurora Avenue and 175th Street. You will note that this map doesn't report on 145th and 205th Streets. These are corridors that the city is also monitoring and helping plan collaboratively with our neighboring cities. So delay is one of the many ways that we evaluate the performance of our streets. However, I wanted to highlight some of the many ways that we can consider a street's performance. And so I'm going to actually point to some of the different ways that we can measure street performance. So some of the things that we think about as users of our streets. Parking availability. Is this an easy place to park? Comfort for walking. Is it a pleasant place to walk? Am I buffered from vehicle traffic? Urban form. How do the buildings interact with the street? How does this place make me feel? Economic vibrancy. Are storefronts open? Is this a vibrant place? Access to buildings. How easy is it for me to access my destination? And can I access it both by foot, by bike, and by car? Transit speed and reliability. Does this corridor support buses that are on time and move quickly? Stop environment. How do I feel waiting for transit? Is there enough lighting, seating? Is it welcoming and clean? Crossing distances. How long does it take me to cross the street? And as a pedestrian, how comfortable am I? And vehicle mobility. Vehicle delay is a standard measure, how long I wait at a light. But as you can see, that is just one of the many factors that we should consider the performance of our streets. So with that, I think I'm going to transition it over to Marcy so that she can ask a question. You're on mute, Marcy.
Thank you. I keep doing that. We have another poll and are interested in your perspective on what you would be willing to tolerate a little more congestion and slower travel times when driving if it meant that. And the responses, people walking could cross the street more safely. Our streets are friendlier for people biking. Transit service is frequent and reliable, which may require giving buses priority over cars. We could avoid widening our streets, preserving land for trees, green space, or other amenities, and any other thoughts you have on that topic. So if you can enter any other perspectives in the chat, we would be very interested in hearing that.
Marcy, I'm going to chime in here because I think we have missed one option here, which is the none of the above.
Thank you.
Traffic flow is really important to you, we want to hear that as well.
So that is the none of the above option is one we would be interested in hearing about as well. All right. So there is an interest in helping people safely cross the street and in biking, bus, and the other street amenities, which make it more interesting and comfortable to walk.
Well, that's a wonderful segue into kind of moving on to some of our other modes here. So appreciate
on to cycling.
Yes, yes. There we go. The next mode we're going to talk about is bicycling. How can Shoreline provide a system that is welcoming by people traveling by bike? So, there are many types of infrastructure that influence what it's like to bike in the city. These include things like trails, pathway connections, bicycle and pedestrian bridges that help cyclists cross big roads like I-5 or Aurora without mixing with traffic, as well as what people can access by a short bike ride from their home, like getting to school or parks or shops. Over the past decade, how we plan for bicycling has evolved. To make communities truly comfortable places to bike, we have shifted our focus to accommodating the types of cyclists we are trying to serve. This slide here shows the 4 typical types of cyclists, and I'm going to kind of describe these categories starting on the left-hand side and moving over to the right. So level 1 represents children and bicyclists that require high levels of separation from vehicle traffic to feel comfortable. Level 2 represents bicyclists that have a slightly higher tolerance for mixing with vehicle traffic, but still likely are only comfortable traveling on streets with lower speeds and lower volumes. This category actually represents most of the population. Level 3 represents bicyclists with a higher tolerance for mixing with vehicle traffic. They might be comfortable using a bike along an arterial street. This group often represents our bicycle commuters. And then lastly, level 4 represents bicyclists that are extremely adventurous. They have a high tolerance for mixing with vehicle traffic and are often willing to take the lane, even on a busy street. We usually don't plan for this group as they require few accommodations and represent a very small subset of the population. So here are some images of real facilities in Shoreline that accommodate the types of cyclists that we discussed on the previous slide. As you can see from the images, level 1 and 2 facilities tend to be trails which are fully separated from vehicle traffic or low volume, low speed residential streets. Level 3 facilities can be bike lanes along collector and minor arterials, and level 4 facilities include arterials where bicyclists must navigate cars. So, pass on here. We are in the process of mapping Shoreline's existing bike network for what it looks like today. In the survey, we want to hear from you about what barriers you face to biking and where you want to bike more comfortably. But I think before that, we'll pass it back to Marcy, who has a question for you now. You're on mute again, Marcy.
Oh dear. The poll this time is, if you ride a bike, how do you use it? And if you could select all that apply, if you have any other additional comments, please put those in the chat. And also just a reminder to everyone, if you have questions anytime during this presentation, please put them in the Q&A. So we have people who cycle for exercise and recreation. We have some commuters, errands, and some about half our group doesn't ride a bike. So thank you for that feedback. And now we will move on to walking with Kendra.
Okay, the next mode we're going to talk about is walking. How can Shoreline plan a system that is welcoming for people walking? There is a lot of existing infrastructure in Shoreline for people walking. Sidewalks, trails, pathways, and ped bike bridges. By pathways, we're referring to the informal dirt paths in the city, which show the route that people walking prefer to take, but which are not paved. These can provide a more direct route for accessing key destinations. As you may know, the city has already gone through an extensive process to map the future pedestrian network that we call the Sidewalk Prioritization Plan. This map shows the existing sidewalks, shown in blue, plus about 75 miles of planned sidewalks, shown in red, that were identified as a part of that process. The voter-approved 2018 sales and use tax will fund 12 high-priority sidewalk projects. Although the bond period is 20 years, the city's goal is to construct 12 sidewalk projects within the next 10 years, or roughly by 2028. Now that we have a plan for the city's sidewalk network, we want to understand the crossings and the neighborhood paths that could enhance safety and walkability. So as a team, we thought about asking that as a poll, but we couldn't figure out how to do that effectively on Zoom. So I just wanted to take a moment really to pitch the survey, the online TMP survey that Nora mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. That's going to be a really great opportunity for you to provide that sort of information for us. We also want to hear where you would like to, in that survey, we'd love to hear from you where you would like to see new or enhanced crosswalks or pathways. Please take the online survey to share your thoughts. So with that, I think I'm going to pass it back to Nora, who's going to talk about transit.
You're muted, Nora.
Oh, I'm sorry. The next mode we're going to talk about is taking transit. How can Shoreline partner with transit agencies in the region to plan a system that's welcoming for people riding transit? 2 light rail stations are opening in Shoreline by 2024. Next slide. As part of the Linwood Link light rail extension, station subareas around the 148th and 185th stations support dense, diverse, and walkable neighborhoods. Sound Transit Stride, which is shown by that yellow line in the lower right-hand corner of the map, will provide bus rapid transit, known as BRT, from Bothell to the 148th Street station. Stride buses will run as often as every 10 minutes. Sound Transit will be adding sidewalk segments and 2 bus stops along 145th corridor at 15th Avenue and 30th Avenue. Community Transit will be extending its Swift Blue Line from Aurora Village Transit Center, which is next to Costco, to the 185th station by 2024. That route is shown with the blue dash line. This is the interim route. And the next slide shows the long-term vision to run this route along Aurora and then turn onto 185th and connect with the light rail station. Building on these new light rail connections, the city has been working with King County Metro for years on an integrated transit vision. The city is also working with Metro on non-fixed route service throughout Shoreline. Here's Metro Connect's 2040 plan with local, frequent, and express bus service. Metro routes are in flux, and there's no guaranteeing that the lines on this map are coming. Metro will be starting outreach for restructuring buses to and from our future light rail stations soon. I encourage you to make your input known. While some types of future transit service are not under the city's control, the city is working with our regional transit partners, including King County Metro, Sound Transit, and Community Transit, about what the future transit service might look like. We want to hear from you about your priorities and to help us inform decisions. Now I'll pass it back to Marcy for a quick poll on this subject.
So we would like to hear from you. It's helpful to know what options you would be potentially interested in the future. So if you could let us know if you would anticipate or like to use light rail, stride bus, Swift Blue Line, King County Metro bus, or other, which you could add in the chat, or if you're not interested in riding transit. Those are all helpful responses for us to hear. All right. So it looks to me like people participating today are interested in future light rail opening in Shoreline and also anticipate using other bus service. So with that, we are interested in knowing any other questions you have, any other thoughts you have based on what you've heard in the presentation today or other sources of information about this project. And if you could enter any questions, observations in the Q&A function, Sarah will be helping us identify any responses to those questions.
Great, so we've already received several questions. The first one refers to the survey results from our first survey. The question is, the data from residents appears to have been compiled from 500 responses. Is that number relevant considering the population we have?
I'll take that question. Thanks for the question. So our population is roughly 55,000. And so 500 might seem like a very small amount. We need to start somewhere. We hope that that number, the momentum of involvement in this project will continue to grow. And partly, I guess I would say, if anyone on this open house has ideas of how we can better spread the word, our outreach series extends until July 16th. So if there's any other groups that you think would appreciate hearing this presentation, please let me know. And I also want to say that we did get valuable feedback from the survey. And I really, I cruised through it and with just 2 slides, but we have published a summary of our survey on the city's web page, the TMP web page, that has the charts and graphs and narratives that we heard from those 500 people that responded. Thank you.
So the next question is about mobility hubs. It says, I still don't understand how the mobility hubs work. We can bring the shared car, bikes, and scooters back to where we live. Others will bring it back to the mobility hubs. I think just trying to get some clarification on how that works.
Thank you for your question. Honestly, our city is trying to work that out right now because it is a new field of transportation. And we I think we see a distinction between the different devices of mobility options, whether it's car share or scooters or bikes, versus, so there's the devices themselves and then there's the infrastructure. So thinking about these mobility hubs as collectors of different modal options that you can use to complete those short trips. And then also the connections between those hubs in, let's say, your front door or the light rail station or a park. What are those conditions like for using a bike share or a scooter share? Meaning we need to re-examine those corridors and see if we need to make improvements to make those rides safer and more comfortable. So that kind of touches back to the part of the presentation that Kendra gave about that whole spectrum of different comfortability for users around cycling and using scooter share. And we really want to aim for that level 2, which is the people that are interested but cautious, because that represents most of the population. If we can build a network of comfortable places to walk and bike, our people will do that more. So, and then just kind of touching back in that we're really figuring out, working on this because it is a new fields. There's going to be all kinds of franchise mobility device companies that will come to town, and especially as we get closer to station opening, they see Shoreline is really a nexus for different travel modes. But we are trying to take this planning moment to really focus on what infrastructure we need to make those trips. I hope that helped a little bit, but I just also appreciate this. This is a whole new topic, and we are going to be coming back to you with more information on it.
It might be worth noting, Nora, part of what I heard in the question was, will you be able to ride these to your house? And in some cases, yes, is the answer to that question. And it kind of depends on what, ride share option you're talking about. But in some cases, like the electric assist scooters or bikes, the companies themselves have collectors that will pick up the bike or scooter at the end of the day and bring them back to the hubs. And so, yeah, to answer that direct question, perhaps is the answer that you can possibly, in some cases, ride them to your front door.
Thank you. Thanks, Kendra.
All right, we have 2 more questions and a comment. Is street lighting a part of the plan? And I said, in short, yes, but thought you might be able to speak to that a little bit more, Nora.
I'm actually going to pass this to Kendra Dudinsky, if that's okay, because I know that our city recently did a street light master plan.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I can field that question. I think it's been probably 2 or so years at this point, but we did complete a fairly comprehensive overview and analysis of our streetlight system in Shoreline, really looking at existing streetlight pole or utility poles and where additional street lighting made sense based on spacing and illumination levels that are present currently. It also constructed the sort of framework for policy around when we would consider installation of streetlights, how those come into us via requests, and how we balance those with kind of the overarching priorities and needs. In general, the priority is going to be on higher volume, higher speed roadways, and specifically at intersections and crossings. And it kind of falls under, it goes down from there, looking at the next classification and volume and speed of streets, et cetera, with sort of local streets being the lowest priority. But we do still field a lot of requests for local streets, so we balance our annual budget for streetlights with roughly 5 priority installations going to the higher priorities, the more arterial intersection type installations, and then another 5 going to on a request basis. That's not a lot of lights, right? 10 is not a lot per year, but that is what we are currently budgeted for. And so that's what we work within. We also have engineering standards that we've kind of updated over the last couple of years that require developers to install pedestrian scale lighting and in some cases street lighting as part of their redevelopment. And so that'll be another way that particularly within the sub areas, we'll start seeing our street light system sort of being pieced together. Hopefully that answers the question, but in general, our streetlight master plan, which is online currently on our city website, does show sort of the gaps where we currently have gaps, and then our sort of framework for how we make decisions about streetlights. And I will pull that the outreach that we did for that process up in the chat for everybody.
All right, we have a couple more questions. Where would on-street parking be relevant per the vision and stakeholder feedback? It's my experience that businesses throughout the city are located on the arterials and have parking lots and/or garages.
Yeah, I'll start that question. Answer that question is, part of it is setting a policy around the priorities of how we outfit our streets. So you might remember Kendra Brayland went over all those things that go into a street design to help with vibrancy and support business and walkability, et cetera. And in terms of the on-street parking elements, we still have some more process to do to think about that. And also, it does come down to the context of a street. So we will be endeavoring to set policy around it at a high level. And we certainly, as we're doing these outreach series, we want to hear from the public and from businesses on kind of their future vision of the street. And are they looking for some more outdoor cafe spaces in places that might be right now narrow sidewalks and could use some spillover cafe in a on-street parking space? Or are they looking for more on-street parking space? Or are they looking for more people coming to their shops by walking and biking and taking transit? So I don't have a hard, a definitive answer for you right now. I guess I will pass it to my team as I'm talking. Maybe my teammates might want to add in a couple of more thoughts around that.
If I may, Nora, I'd love to chime in a bit. I think the question is a really good one. What we tend to evaluate as a part of these plans is what is the highest and best use of the curb. So it's not just the curb, of course, has lots of different uses. On-street parking is just one of them. And that can be short-term parking that's maybe just for a few minutes that you're running into a business, or could be all day. But other uses of the curb, of course, include greenery. It's accessing transit, micro-mobility, parking your scooter share or your bike share is another use of it. Nora's talked about streeteries. That's another one. Of course, during the pandemic, we've seen a lot of that, but I know there's a lot of ongoing energy around that use. And then we talked a little bit about Uber and Lyft. Ride hailing, of course, is a use that didn't even exist 10 years ago. And now, particularly right before the pandemic, it was a huge mode share. And something that I've seen as a transportation professional all over the country is actually a shift in premium from that parking space behind the business, that parking lot, because people are driving and staying in that business, to much more of a premium of pickup and drop off. So as a part of this plan, of course, we're not just planning for Shoreline in 2021 and 2022. We're planning for Shoreline looking all the way out to more of a 2040 type horizon. So as we think about Shoreline in that type of horizon, we really want to make sure that we are developing flexible curb spaces that can kind of be resilient and can accommodate kind of modal trends that we're seeing over the next 20 years. And I think I haven't even touched on some of those uses. Electric vehicles are one of them. Is curb somewhere you're going to want to charge up your vehicle. So again, what I would say is that curb space is a very dynamic area, and it's something we're paying a lot of attention to over the course of this planning effort. And I think the last piece I would chime in on that Nora said was that every street is different. Every street's going to have a different context. So thinking about that context is really important.
And I was just going to chime in to add that, we have ongoing study and analysis occurring as part of our, regular operations. So we have, for the last several years, been conducting on-street parking studies as part of the light rail station subarea redevelopment. And so really going out and taking a street by street inventory of how that parking is being utilized during different periods throughout the day. And then also comparing that to redevelopment and the overall supply of parking, both on site, sort of in a private sense, and then on the street. And so that work will be ongoing. And I think, as we see more redevelopment, there's going to be an increased demand for managing that. That comes along with things like restricted parking zones where you get a permit to park on your street if you live there, or managing via, certain time, 2-hour parking to encourage turnover for business, or loading zones where they're needed. So there's a lot of work that goes into managing parking. And I think There, you know, the TMP certainly will set some broader overarching policies and goals to try to strive for, right? So are we prioritizing parking in certain areas responsive to business? Are we prioritizing moving people over storing cars? So those are the types of questions I think the TMP does a good job answering, or will, but there's going to be ongoing and very in-depth operational work that continues as our city grows and changes.
So we have one comment and one more question. We'll see if we can get through those in the last couple of minutes before having some final closing thoughts. Just regarding outreach, there was a suggestion to reach out to PTA groups, local sports clubs, the chamber, and maybe even some local social influencers. If you have specific suggestions for those social influencers, please feel free to reach out to Nora. I think the next slide will have her contact information. I don't know if you wanted to speak to any of those, Nora, before I jump into the last question.
Oh, just thank you so much for sharing specifics about other people we can connect with.
Awesome. So the last question says, right now there's not transit from a bus stop near my house at Aurora and at 160th to the rail station. How is that going to be addressed next time? E-line will work as well to get to downtown despite having a lot of stops.
Yeah, thank you. So this is really a dynamic conversation about how we integrate our future transit system. And I'm really glad that you gave a specific example. One of the things that factors into people's decisions about taking transit is certainly if they need to transfer. How long is, how reliable is it? How frequent is it? Do you need to transfer? And you kind of touched on it already. If you're using the E-line, they call a one-seat trip to downtown, but there's a lot of stops between Shoreline and downtown. King County Metro is going to start up the restructuring of bus service to create some more east-west connectivity to our future light rail stations. So you may find that it might be faster to take an east-west connection to a light rail station and transfer than to use the E-line in the future. That is still all to be determined because Metro is going to be kicking off on that outreach this summer, I believe. And then the other thing is those mobility, micro-mobility options that we mentioned earlier might put a new option on the table for you where you might like to bike or scooter to the light rail station and then get to downtown. Well, we're 2 minutes from the end. Is there anything else that we haven't covered, Sarah, or should I wrap up with some project information?
You can go ahead and wrap up. We covered everything.
All right. So if we can show that very last slide. So I want to thank you for joining during your lunch hour and especially your questions during the Q&A. It's so great to have your engagement in this process. It definitely gets our wheels turning on what's needed in the community. And I want to encourage you to stay engaged with the project by visiting the project webpage if you haven't been there already at shorelinewa.gov/TMP. If you haven't already, please take the survey by July 16th. Encourage other people in your life to do so as well. We will be using the survey results to inform the development of the modal plans. And by that, I mean the driving, the walking, the biking, the taking transit, and the mobility hubs plans. Sign up for e-notifications on Alert Shoreline on our city's website by selecting transportation projects and planning. And we'll be back this winter with another set of opportunities to get involved with the TMP. In the meantime, feel free to always reach out to me. My contact information is right here on the slide. You can email me or call me. I am happy to continue the conversation with you. Thank you. And have a great afternoon.